Dungeon Reaper. A light novel by Bloodmoss. Chapter 19. Fractured Identities. Cain could only attempt to keep breathing when a sudden wave of release slammed into him, like a taut cord snapping back. His body arched in an uncontrollable spasm, and he collapsed onto the dojo floor, the cold wood pressing against his cheek. His eyes rolled back, but it wasn't darkness that consumed him. Instead, a flood of images and sensations tore through him, a lifetime not his own. He saw no. He was Hoshizawa as a young boy, fists raw and bleeding from endless strikes against wooden posts. He felt the weight of a father's hand on his shoulder, firm but proud, and the quiet sorrow of that hand disappearing in the cold stillness of loss. Years blurred past in fragments, the steady rhythm of training, the precision of forms practiced under moonlight, the burden of leadership, and the isolation it brought. Philosophical thoughts intertwined with martial discipline, swirling concepts of mortality and power, of strength used to protect and strength used to destroy. Lessons learned not in words, but in bruises and breathless meditation. Love and loss, victory and failure, all laid bare before Cain in staggering clarity. It was overwhelming, crushing in its depth. Cain felt as though he were drowning in the sheer weight of a life meticulously lived and painfully endured. Finally, the darkness claimed him. A sharp sting bloomed across Cain's cheek. Then another. Mr. Rose. Mr. Rose. Cain's eyes snapped open to the lingering burn of the slap. Blinking against the harsh sunlight filtering in through the ruined dojo, his vision slowly focused on the man crouched in front of him. The first thing Cain noticed was the sharp gleam of small, round purple-tinted glasses perched perfectly on the bridge of the man's nose. The second was the man's suit, easily the most expensive piece of clothing Cain had ever seen outside of magazine covers. The dark fabric was immaculately tailored, not a single thread out of place, despite the dust and chaos surrounding them. Cain's mind, sluggish and clouded by exhaustion, clicked into overdrive. The man's shoes were meticulously shined, the kind of shine that spoke of someone obsessed with detail. Subtle wrinkles around his eyes hinted at age, but his posture, crouched and perfectly balanced, spoke of a practiced fighter, someone who knew how to move and when to strike. This wasn't just some bureaucrat. You've had quite a few people worried about you, Mr. Rose. Cain squinted at him, blinking hard. And you are? The man's lips curled into a knowing smile, as though Cain had just said the most amusing thing in the world. Shen Fang, he said smoothly. Just consider me a representative of an interested third party. Cain frowned. Third party? What are the first two? Shen paused, the smile lingering, as if weighing whether or not to answer. For now, let's consider them the Hollow Blade and Blackthorn Vanguard. That jolted Cain. His thoughts tangled for a second. The Hollow Blade Guild, of course, but Blackthorn Vanguard? His head swam, struggling to piece together scattered memories that weren't even his own. How long have I been out? Cain asked, voice rasping. Shen's smile thinned. You were scheduled to arrive at Blackthorn HQ in Crystalgate yesterday with Ethan Graves. You didn't make it. Cain groaned, trying to sit up. His body protested, limbs leaden and sluggish. Well, send my apologies. He braced himself, pushing up to stand, only for his knees to buckle. Shen caught his arm in an iron grip, steadying him with practiced ease. Thank you, Mr. Fang, Cain muttered reflexively. Shen's eyes narrowed slightly. I am Chinese. It would be Mr. Shen. Cain's first instinct was to call him Mr. Fang again, just to be difficult. But another part of his mind, one far more composed and unfamiliar, agreed entirely. Family names are to be respected. Cain exhaled, shoulders sagging. Of course, of course. Sure Jing, sure Jing. My apologies, Mr. Shen. Shen stiffened. His grip loosened, and he took a step back, eyeing Cain warily. When did you start speaking Mandarin Chinese? Shen's voice was colder now, guarded. Cain waved a hand dismissively. Obviously, my instructor taught me more than what's in my file. He tilted his head slightly. Your government, right? Pretty high up too. So why the sudden interest in a low-ranked dungeon jumper like me? Don't you guys have some gates to miscategorize? For the first time, Shen's smirk faded. His expression hardened. Switching to flawless Mandarin, Shen spoke quietly. "You're coming with me, Mr. Rose. If I must take you by force, I will." Cain's eyes narrowed, the old fire sparking. Without hesitation, he shot back in perfect Mandarin. "Ready to dance? Go ahead and play the music, dumbass." There was a beat of silence. Then Shen laughed, a sharp, genuine sound. "That's more than just a few Mandarin lessons," Cain rose. Cain sighed, realizing he'd been baited for information. "All right. Fine. Tell me what the hell is going on here." Shen's smirk returned as he extended a hand, pulling Cain to his feet with practiced ease. "All in good time. I'll explain everything in the VTOL outside." Cain staggered slightly but managed to steady himself. The two of them moved toward the dojo entrance, the low murmur of police chatter filtering in from beyond. Cain blinked at the sight before him. The once lush courtyard of Kempo no Numa was gone. Where vibrant grass and carefully arranged bamboo gardens once stood, now there was only scorched, brittle earth, blackened and cracked. The ground stretched out in a withered expanse, as if life itself had recoiled from the place. Not a single blade of grass remained. Cain swallowed hard. He had a lot of questions, and Shen Fang, Mr. Shen, probably had more. Questions Cain wasn't sure he could answer. A sleek black VTOL waited at the edge of the scorched earth, its engines humming low. A pilot in a black uniform stood by the open hatch, waiting. Cain's eyes caught the gleam of a logo painted on the side of the craft, Wanxiang Extraction. One of the largest mining corporations in the world. Cain's stomach dropped. What the fuck is going on here? The VTOL engines thrummed with a low, steady hum, vibrating faintly beneath Cain's boots as he was ushered inside. The interior was all sharp lines and polished metal, sleek and sterile in a way that made Cain feel out of place. He slumped into the leather seat opposite Shen Fang, the soft whir of the door sealing them in with an unsettling finality. Shen adjusted the cuffs of his immaculate suit, the motion slow and deliberate. The hum of the engines did little to drown out the suffocating silence between them. Cain shifted uncomfortably, but kept his expression neutral, his eyes flicking to the window as the city of Crystalgate shrank beneath them. "You've been busy, Mr. Rose," Shen began smoothly, the words slicing through the quiet like a scalpel. His tone was polite, almost bored, but Cain could feel the weight behind them. Calculated. Dangerous. Cain leaned back, arms crossed. "Yeah, well, the gig economy's booming. Gotta hustle." Shen's lips curled ever so slightly. Not a smile, more a mechanical acknowledgement of the attempt at humor. He tapped a sleek tablet resting on his lap, pulling up Cain's file. Lines of data scrolled past in silent judgment. Cain rose. Registered alias. Grim. Now that's an interesting moniker. Affiliated adventurer with the Hollow Blade Guild. Above average rank. No known address. No emergency contacts. Barely a blip on the radar until, what was it? Yes, 2 months ago. And yet, your paperwork is flawless. Almost too flawless. Cain's jaw tightened. He said nothing. Shen glanced up, studying him with eyes that seemed to peel back layers. "Funny thing, Mr. Rose. Not a single person recalls meeting you before that date. No former employers, no friends, no digital footprint beyond what's on record. It's as if you dropped out of the sky." Cain forced a smirk. "What can I say? I'm a private guy." Shen ignored the deflection. "And then there's your living situation, or lack thereof. Residing in that charming Geo Metro. No utility bills, no registered dwelling. You operate completely under the radar. Now, I can overlook a drifter, but then..." He leaned forward, fingers steepled. "You spoke fluent Mandarin earlier. Yet, there's no record of you studying it." "None. And that I find fascinating, Mr. Rose. If that is your real name." Cain's smirk faltered for just a heartbeat. The inside of the VTOL suddenly felt smaller, the walls closer. Hoshizawa's voice seemed to whisper in the back of his mind, feeding doubt. Paranoia slithered in, coiling tight around his thoughts. "Hey, Maybe I picked it up from a podcast. Or a self-help tape. Learn Mandarin in your sleep. You should try it. I thought I saw 5 ways to make people like you for sale online. Might loosen you up. Shen's expression didn't change, but the air between them thickened. You misunderstand me, Mr. Rose. This isn't a casual curiosity. People like you don't just exist. Not without someone noticing. Yet, here you are. And guess what someone is noticing? Cain leaned forward now, mirroring Shen's posture, voice low. So what is this then? You going to tell me I'm some secret experiment? An alien? Maybe I'm just a guy who's had a rough couple of years. But you're not here because I'm sleeping in my car. So why don't you cut the crap and tell me what you really want? A pause. Then, Shen tilted his head slightly, regarding Cain with something close to amusement, or was it interest? Tell me, Mr. Rose. Do you believe in fate? Or perhaps, cycles? Cain's pulse quickened, but he forced his face to remain blank. Shen caught the flicker in his eyes and Cain's mind raced. Shen was probing, looking for cracks. For confirmation. Cain exhaled slowly, leaning back once more. Nah, I believe in bad luck and worse timing. And right now, you're both. Shen's eyes narrowed, just a fraction. He leaned back, satisfaction flickering briefly across his face. The VTOL jolted slightly as it shifted course, the city vanishing beneath dense cloud cover. You're full of clouded answers, Mr. Rose. But I wonder how many are the truth. We'll be arriving shortly. I suggest you think carefully about which ones you want to keep telling. A sharp chime crackled in Shen's earpiece. His expression shifted subtly, a flicker of tension crossing his otherwise impassive face. He raised a hand, pressing 2 fingers to the device. This is Shen. Go ahead. The voice on the other end was tight, urgent. Sir, we've got a situation, outskirts of Crystalgate. Reports of widespread panic, civilians turning violent. DRB is scrambling, but it's spreading fast. The VTOL suddenly banked hard to the right, adjustment motors groaning under the strain. Cain instinctively braced himself, gripping the armrests as the cityscape tilted wildly. Through the reinforced window, he caught a glimpse of the ground below. Chaos. The town square was a war zone. Cars were overturned, flames licking at storefronts. People swarmed in the streets, some fleeing, others attacking anything in sight, even each other. A man screamed as he lashed out at thin air, his face twisted in terror. 2 adventurers in partial armor grappled on the ground, their weapons forgotten as they clawed at each other's throats. But it wasn't just panic. Tendrils of inky blackness slithered through the air like smoke, reaching out with a sinister intelligence. They weaved between buildings, coiling into homes, slipping through cracks in doors and windows. In gas stations, in cafes, even inside cars stuck in traffic, nowhere was safe. The dark tendrils touched minds, unraveling sanity with a single brush. Cain watched in horror as a man clawed at his own face, blood streaming from his eyes as he shrieked. Another woman, eyes vacant, bashed her head against a storefront window until the glass shattered, her scalp torn and bleeding. Others turned on each other in a frenzy, biting, clawing, screaming. The very air seemed poisoned, saturated with dread. And in the center of it all, calmly walked the kind teacher that had offered him a room in the back of his small dojo. Cain could also feel a pulse. A distant thumping. He knew that rhythm. It was his own, and it was now in perfect sync with Shihan Hoshizawa. Shen's voice snapped him back. Pilot, hover. I want visuals across the perimeter. Cain couldn't tear his eyes away. This isn't random. It's him. Hoshizawa. Shen turned sharply, eyes narrowing. Explain. Now. Cain swallowed hard, his mind racing. He's my mentor. Something's wrong with him. That is his ability, his aura. But it's not him. He is a quiet Kempo instructor. He's not doing this. Shen stared for a heartbeat, then snapped his fingers. The cockpit filled with the static hum of a news broadcast. A frantic reporter's voice cut through. Violence continues to escalate in the outer districts. Authorities have yet to identify the cause of these sudden outbreaks of aggression. Witnesses report hallucinations, paranoia, and extreme hostility. DRB officials urge citizens to remain indoors. Shen muted the feed, his face dark. Is this some kind of plague? Are you telling me your mentor can unleash mass hysteria? Or are you his accomplice? A sleeper agent? You need to make me understand, Mr. Rose, because people are dying right now. And I need to know if you caused this or how we can stop it. Who are you with? What shadow organization do you belong to? You're running out of time, Mr. Rose. Cain's grip tightened on the armrest. His pulse hammered in his ears, but the fog of paranoia cleared for just a moment. He met Shen's gaze, steady and unflinching. I'm not with anyone, but I might be the only one who can stop him. I need you to let me try. Shen stared at him for a long moment, weighing the words and the risk. Cain noticed something shift in Shen's eyes. Just for a moment, a flicker of something he wasn't meant to see. Recognition, maybe even irritation. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. Even with Cain's sharpened sense of reading people, this man was an impenetrable wall. Emotions under lock and key, released only when Shen wanted them to be. Then Shen muttered under his breath, barely audible over the hum of the veto L. Oh, Shaniqua, your timing sucks as always. Cain's brain stalled. Shaniqua? The name stabbed at his thoughts, but no, he refused to believe it was the same Shaniqua. His Reaper supervisor couldn't possibly be connected to this man. And then it hit him. The pull. Not the gentle nudge he usually felt guiding him to the in-between. This was violent. A forceful yank, like invisible hooks digging into his skin and dragging him under. Panic flared as his limbs stiffened, his vision distorting at the edges. Cain's gaze snapped back to Shen. He really looked at him for the first time. The poised, perfect posture. The controlled movements. The small, round purple-tinted glasses pushed delicately up the bridge of his nose. And then, that knowing smile. Edgar. Cain's voice cracked with disbelief, fury bubbling to the surface. You fucking asshole. The rest of the curse was ripped from his throat as the world tilted and darkness swallowed him whole.